Maya stepped out of her father's house, her hands still trembling from the tense dinner they had just shared. The air outside felt heavier than usual, as if it carried the weight of her emotions. She had come hoping for a warm evening, maybe even a small connection with her dad, but instead, the night had been filled with awkward silences and forced smiles. Richard Hartwell, her father, had hardly looked at her, distracted by trivial things, and every word he spoke had a distant, cold tone that made her stomach twist with discomfort. She started walking toward the driveway, thinking about how long it had been since she last saw him. College, new friends, and her small successes had created a distance between them. But she had hoped that being here, even for just a few hours, might bring a spark of the father-daughter bond she had once imagined. Her heart ached with the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, he cared more than he showed. Then, as she opened the car door to leave, she heard a muffled voice coming from the slightly open window. Curiosity pulled her closer, and she froze as the words became clear. "I can't believe she still thinks she loves me. She's just a burden. Always has been." The words sliced through her like ice. She stumbled back, gripping the car for support, her mind unable to process what she had just heard. Everything she had believed about her father shattered in an instant. The sleepless nights she had spent worrying about whether he was proud of her, the times she had stayed up late studying, hoping he would notice, the small moments of joy she had imagined sharing with him. All of it felt like lies now. The man she had admired, the one she had wanted to impress and make happy, had never truly cared for her at all. Maya's chest tightened as a mix of sorrow and anger swelled inside her. She wanted to run, to scream, to cry, but the words hung in her mind unshakable and cruel. The house, the dinner, even her father himself seemed smaller now, diminished by the harsh truth she had uncovered. She felt hollow, betrayed, as if a part of her that had clung to hope had been ripped away. But beneath the pain, a flicker of resolve ignited. If her father could see her as nothing more than a burden, then he would also have to face the consequences of underestimating her. Maya's thoughts shifted from hurt to determination. She would not let this betrayal define her. Something had to change, and she would find a way to make him understand, one way or another, that she was not someone to be dismissed or ignored. The first spark of her plan began to form, quiet but fierce, as she started the car and drove into the night, leaving the house and the father she had once loved behind. Maya closed the door to her apartment and sank onto the couch, feeling as if the walls were pressing in on her. The world outside seemed distant and irrelevant, and all she could hear was the echo of her father's cruel words. She wrapped herself in a blanket and let her mind drift, unwilling or unable to face anyone. The pain was sharp, and every memory she had of her childhood now felt tainted by the realization of how little her father had truly cared. Images of the past flooded in. She remembered standing on the stage during her school recital, her small hands shaking as she played the piano, hoping to see him in the audience. But the seat where he should have been was always empty, and she could never understand why he never showed up. Birthdays were no different. While other kids had fathers bringing gifts, cheering, or hugging them tightly, her presents were often late, generic, or forgotten entirely. Every time she tried to share her achievements, Richard's response was a quiet sigh or a critical remark, making her feel that nothing she did was ever enough. Her mother, Lillian, had always been the quieter presence in her life. She tried to shield Maya from the harshness, but she seemed unaware of the depth of Richard's indifference. Maya had grown up believing her mother's silence was just caution, but now it felt like another layer of isolation. Lillian had tolerated his behavior for years, never standing up for either of them, and that passivity had left Maya to face the emotional void on her own. Sitting alone, Maya realized the full weight of the betrayal. The father she had loved, the man she had sought approval from, had never valued her at all. The truth was a bitter taste in her mouth, and for a long time, she just stared at the walls, letting the grief and anger settle over her. It was too much to process in one sitting, and yet she couldn't turn away from it. After hours of sitting in silence, Maya felt a faint stir of clarity. Confronting Richard now would accomplish nothing. It would only leave her raw and exposed. She needed a way to protect herself, a way to take control of the situation without losing the advantage. Slowly, a plan began to form in her mind. She would wait, observe, and prepare. He had underestimated her for years, and it was time she became the one in control. The hurt remained, but it was accompanied by a quiet determination. Maya understood that this betrayal was not just a wound, it was a turning point. She would not let it define her, but it would shape the way she approached everything that came next. Maya woke up the next morning feeling drained, but strangely clear-headed. The pain was still there, sharp and heavy, but it no longer controlled her. Something inside her had shifted. She knew she couldn't stay in that small apartment filled with memories of hoping Richard would someday care. She needed a fresh start, one built on her own strength, not on waiting for anyone's approval. She began by packing her things slowly, choosing only what she truly needed. The rest she left behind without hesitation. Within a week, she had found a better apartment, bright, spacious, and far from the places that reminded her of disappointment. Moving there felt like taking her first real breath in years. She decorated it with calm colors and simple furniture, building an environment that felt safe and completely her own. With her space settled, Maya focused on her future. She enrolled in advanced courses, spending long nights studying and sharpening the skills she knew would matter in the corporate world. Every assignment, every late-night reading session felt purposeful. She wasn't just learning, she was building herself into someone stronger, someone impossible to dismiss. It wasn't long before she landed a job at a competitive corporate firm. The environment was fast, demanding, and full of people who were driven by ambition. Strangely, Maya thrived there. She kept her emotions tucked away and let her determination guide her. Her work spoke for her, and for the first time, she felt control slipping back into her hands. But the plan forming in her mind wasn't just about personal success. She wanted leverage, not to hurt blindly, but to make her father finally feel the weight of what he had done. She spent her evenings researching his business deals, the partnerships he relied on, the weak spots he likely didn't know she could reach. She learned about financial structures, company reports, and the quiet cracks in his professional world. Every detail she gathered brought her closer to understanding how vulnerable he really was. During this time, Maya met Simon Hale, a senior manager at her company. He was calm, insightful, and carried a steady confidence that made people trust him. Simon noticed her work ethic first, then her quiet intensity. Over time, he became someone she could speak to, someone who offered guidance without judgment. She never told him the full truth about her father, but he sensed her wounds and taught her how to turn anger into focus and pain into strategy. Through their conversations, Maya learned how to think several steps ahead, how to stay composed, and how to keep her emotions from clouding her decisions. It was the first time someone helped her grow without expecting anything in return. As the weeks passed, Maya's plan stopped being just an idea. It became a direction, steady, deliberate, and quietly powerful. She wasn't rushing. She wasn't reacting. She was preparing. Her father had taken years to make her feel small. She would take her time showing him exactly how wrong he was. Maya walked up to her father's house with a calm smile, carefully masking the storm inside her. She had thought about this moment for weeks, planning every word, every gesture. The goal was clear: make him believe she had forgiven him, that the painful phone call had been forgotten, and that she still wanted his approval. She rang the doorbell, her heart steady but her mind sharp, ready to observe every detail. Richard opened the door, his face lighting up with a forced warmth. "Maya, it's been too long," he said, stepping aside to let her in. Maya responded with a soft, measured smile, hugging him lightly, as if the past had not left its scars. Her calm demeanor made him relax, and he launched into small talk, talking about his work, his friends, and little successes he wanted to brag about. As the conversation flowed, Maya noticed subtle patterns she hadn't paid attention to before. He spoke with arrogance, always turning stories back to himself, ignoring moments when she tried to share her own experiences. He praised others in front of her, highlighting their achievements while offering only vague acknowledgement of hers. It was almost comical, except for the way it reminded her of his consistent disregard for her throughout her life. She carefully listened to every word, taking mental notes. Richard mentioned a few business decisions, speaking casually about risky investments and poor management, clearly unconcerned about the consequences. He laughed at mistakes others had made and casually admitted to bending rules when it suited him. Maya's mind catalogued every example of his recklessness, arrogance, and favoritism, knowing that each would later form part of her strategy. Throughout the visit, Maya maintained her act flawlessly. She laughed at his jokes, nodded at his stories, and appeared to hang on his every word. Richard, oblivious, believed he was reconnecting with his daughter, regaining his fatherly image. He even suggested small gestures of bonding, dinners, weekend visits, shared hobbies, believing she still depended on him emotionally. But Maya's smile hid a sharper purpose. She wasn't just reconnecting. She was observing, analyzing, and collecting. Every careless word, every sign of arrogance or manipulation was noted, stored carefully in her mind. She let him think he still had power over her, letting him see vulnerability where there was none. By the time she left, Richard was convinced the rift had healed. Maya waved goodbye with the same gentle smile, walking away while her mind buzzed with plans. The tension was deliberate. She had drawn him in, made him comfortable, and ensured he would underestimate her at every turn. Her patience, control, and calculated calm were becoming her strongest weapons. Maya returned home from her visit feeling more focused than ever. She knew that if she wanted Richard to truly understand the cost of his neglect, she needed to hit where it would hurt the most, his pride and his business. She began by quietly researching his companies, digging into public records, financial statements, and news reports. It didn't take long to find cracks in the empire he had always boasted about. Risky investments, unpaid debts, and careless partnerships littered the files, but Richard's arrogance had blinded him to their danger. To gain deeper insight, Maya decided she needed someone closer to him. That's when she met Eleanor Shaw, his trusted assistant. Eleanor was professional, organized, and had been working with Richard for years. Maya approached her carefully, asking questions about business practices, subtly complimenting Eleanor's competence, and creating a bond of trust. Eleanor, unaware of Maya's intentions, gradually began sharing details of Richard's dealings, the problems he ignored, and the tensions building among his colleagues. Maya listened, absorbing everything with patience, never pushing too hard, never letting her intentions show. With Eleanor's help and her own research, Maya now had access to information that could ruin Richard if used correctly. She discovered unpaid loans that could trigger legal consequences, contracts that favored competitors, and decisions he had made on impulse, leaving the company vulnerable. Each piece of knowledge was a tool she could wield later, but she remained careful, observing without alerting him. Her calm demeanor and polite inquiries kept her invisible. Richard continued to believe he was untouchable, that his power and experience were unchallenged. Maya began to subtly change her own behavior, dropping hints of independence. She spoke more confidently about her career achievements, her future plans, and her ability to manage her own life. In casual conversation, she mentioned promotions, investments, and projects she had handled on her own. Richard, caught up in his arrogance, barely noticed the shift. He thought she was simply growing up, still seeking his guidance, unaware that each word was calculated to signal her rising strength. Every interaction, every discovery, every small act of independence added to Maya's growing advantage. She was building a position of power that Richard could never see coming. While he remained blind to his own vulnerabilities, Maya silently prepared for the moment when all of this knowledge and skill would force him to face the consequences of years of neglect and arrogance. She had learned to move carefully, quietly, and with purpose, turning every small detail into part of a larger plan that was already taking shape in her mind. Maya spent days preparing for the small gathering, carefully planning every detail. She wanted it to feel like a simple celebration of her recent promotion at work, something Richard could attend without suspicion. Invitations were casual, the mood light, and everything designed to make him believe he was stepping into a moment of pride for his daughter. Maya dressed elegantly but understated, projecting warmth and gratitude. When Richard arrived, he walked in with a confident smile, expecting admiration and praise. He had rehearsed compliments in his head, imagining the evening as a way to reconnect and remind himself that he was still important in her life. Maya greeted him with a bright smile and a soft hug, perfectly calm. She spoke of her work, her progress, and the people she had met, letting him feel included while subtly steering the conversation toward memories from the past. As the evening progressed, Maya began to drop stories from her childhood, framed as fond or funny memories. She mentioned the school recital he had missed, how she had waited nervously backstage, imagining him in the audience. She laughed lightly about her birthdays when presents arrived late or were forgotten, carefully keeping her tone light and nostalgic. Each story sounded innocent on the surface, but the truth beneath it was sharp. Richard felt a strange unease, a tug at his conscience, but he couldn't pinpoint why these anecdotes felt heavier than they should. Maya continued, weaving in moments of subtle humiliation and neglect. She recounted times when she had sought his advice and guidance, only to be dismissed or criticized. She spoke softly, almost dreamily, as if remembering the past with a gentle heart. But the controlled anger behind her words cut deeper than any direct accusation could have. Richard shifted in his seat, fidgeting slightly, his confident mask slipping. Every laugh, every smile, every calm story was carefully measured. Maya's composure made her words sting without appearing confrontational. She let silence linger at the right moments, watching his reactions closely. Richard tried to maintain his charm, but the growing anxiety in his eyes betrayed him. He realized, too late, that the daughter he thought still needed him had become someone powerful, deliberate, and aware of all the ways he had failed her. By the end of the evening, Richard was unsettled, unsure of what had shifted in their relationship. Maya's calm presence and controlled storytelling had turned the evening into a subtle, psychological exposure of his failures. She didn't raise her voice or accuse him directly, but the emotional weight of her words left him uneasy and self-conscious. For the first time in years, he felt vulnerable in her presence, and Maya quietly savored the satisfaction of watching the tables turn without ever showing the full force of her intent. Maya spent weeks preparing for the moment she would take control. She carefully gathered all the information she had collected about Richard's financial mismanagement, unpaid debts, poor investments, and risky deals that could easily backfire. She waited until she had enough evidence to make an impact without giving him any chance to defend himself. Every detail was verified, every document cross-checked, ensuring that when the time came, nothing could be dismissed as coincidence or exaggeration. She began subtly sharing information with Richard's business partners, framing it as concern for the company's future rather than personal revenge. Her tone was polite, measured, and professional. The partners, unaware of her personal connection to Richard, took her insights seriously. They began questioning Richard's decisions, reviewing contracts, and demanding explanations for mistakes he had long ignored. Slowly, whispers of doubt started spreading through the professional circles Richard had once dominated. Richard, oblivious at first, continued to act confidently, assuming nothing would threaten his reputation. But as inquiries increased and colleagues expressed concern, the cracks in his empire became visible. Deals stalled, negotiations faltered, and his image as a competent and respected businessman began to crumble. The arrogance he had relied on for so long was no longer enough to maintain control. Each day, he felt the pressure mounting, though he had no idea who was orchestrating it. Through it all, Maya maintained her role as the polite, appreciative daughter. She congratulated him on small achievements, asked questions about his work, and laughed at his jokes, giving him the illusion that she still depended on him emotionally. Richard, starved for validation, clung to these moments, believing he could regain her admiration. He began seeking her input, offering her guidance on minor decisions, and subtly asking for her forgiveness for past misunderstandings. What he didn't realize was that Maya already knew everything, more than he could ever imagine. Her calm demeanor and seeming gratitude made him vulnerable, eager to please, and increasingly desperate for her approval. She responded with gentle advice, careful questions, and encouraging words, all while keeping the full extent of her knowledge hidden. Maya watched as his desperation grew, as he tried to repair the damage to his reputation while simultaneously hoping to restore the connection with her. She let him struggle under the weight of consequences he had ignored for years, knowing that every misstep, every anxious phone call, and every failed negotiation was a direct result of his arrogance and neglect. Quietly, methodically, she was turning his world upside down, proving without confrontation that she was no longer the powerless child he had always dismissed. Maya called Richard and suggested they meet privately, framing it as a discussion about family and future plans. He agreed immediately, expecting it to be another routine conversation where he could reassure himself of his role as a father. When he arrived, Maya greeted him with calm composure, her expression neutral, giving nothing away. She had prepared carefully, knowing this would be the moment to confront him directly without losing control. As they sat down, Maya spoke slowly, choosing each word with precision. She recounted the night she had overheard him on the phone, the words that had shattered her trust and broken her heart. She described how hearing him call her a burden had forced her to face the truth about their relationship. Richard's confident demeanor faltered slightly, and he opened his mouth to dismiss her feelings, but she didn't allow him to interrupt. She continued, calmly outlining years of neglect. She spoke of the recitals he had missed, the birthdays forgotten, and the constant criticism disguised as advice. She mentioned the subtle humiliations and favoritism that had made her feel small for so long. With each story, her tone remained steady and controlled, but the weight of her words pressed on Richard. For the first time, he realized that she wasn't simply hurting. She had been observing, remembering, and now speaking with authority. Richard attempted to deflect, claiming she misunderstood or exaggerated, trying to gaslight her into doubting herself. But Maya remained unshaken. She had documented and remembered everything, and her evidence of his failures, both emotional and professional, was undeniable. His attempts to regain control only highlighted his arrogance and lack of awareness. When she finished recounting the past, Maya delivered a final, powerful statement about betrayal, self-worth, and freedom. She explained how she had grown beyond his neglect, how she had built her life without relying on him, and how his opinion no longer defined her. Her voice was steady, but each word carried the force of years of pain transformed into strength. She stood up, giving him a long, measured look. She offered him one choice. He could attempt genuine reconciliation, facing the truth of his mistakes with humility, or he could remain isolated, clinging to his arrogance and denial. Maya turned and walked toward the door, leaving Richard to sit in silence, the full impact of her words sinking in. For the first time, he felt the weight of all he had ignored, and Maya left knowing that the power dynamic had finally shifted, permanently and unmistakably, in her favor. After their confrontation, Richard's world began to unravel quietly, but relentlessly. His business partners, now aware of his mistakes and financial carelessness, began distancing themselves. Deals he had counted on fell apart, contracts were questioned, and colleagues who once admired him started avoiding him. The arrogance he had relied on for years no longer protected him. Instead, it made his failures more glaring. He faced professional loss he had never anticipated, and each setback chipped away at his once solid reputation. Socially, Richard found himself isolated. Friends who had enjoyed his charm and influence now regarded him with skepticism. Invitations dwindled, casual conversations turned tense, and whispers followed him wherever he went. People who had once sought his company for status or advantage now hesitated to associate with him. The embarrassment was constant, a reminder that the world had noticed what he had long ignored: his recklessness, his manipulation, and the way he had treated those closest to him. Internally, the weight of guilt pressed down harder than the external consequences. Richard could no longer deny the truth of Maya's words. Memories he had once dismissed or justified returned with clarity. The empty chairs at recitals, the forgotten birthdays, the subtle ways he had undermined her confidence. For the first time, he truly understood the pain he had caused, and there was no charm, no arrogance, and no excuse that could erase it. Meanwhile, Maya thrived. She poured herself into her career, her studies, and her personal growth, each success reinforcing the strength she had built. She no longer sought his approval or measured her worth by his recognition. Her independence, confidence, and calm control over her own life became her revenge. Quiet, unassailable, and deeply satisfying. Every achievement was a testament to her resilience and determination. Richard attempted a final apology, awkward and desperate. He spoke of regret, of wishing he could turn back time, of hoping she could forgive him. But Maya had moved beyond the need for his approval. She listened politely, acknowledging his words without giving them power over her. She understood now that love without respect was not love at all. The apology, though sincere in its own way, could not undo years of neglect, and she no longer felt the need to wait for it. The story of their lives reached a natural, emotional justice. Maya's strength, success, and self-respect became her true revenge, while Richard's humiliation, guilt, and loss served as the consequences of his choices. There was no violence, no dramatic confrontation needed. Only the quiet, undeniable truth that betrayal cannot be ignored forever, and those who underestimate the strength of those they harm eventually face the results of their own actions. Maya settled into her life with a sense of calm she had never known before. Her career continued to flourish, each project and promotion reinforcing the confidence she had built over months of careful planning and hard work. She found joy not just in her achievements, but in the independence they gave her. The freedom to make her own choices without anyone's approval shaping her path. Work became a source of pride and purpose, and with every challenge she faced, she grew stronger and more assured of her own abilities. Alongside her professional life, Maya nurtured friendships that felt real and enduring. She spent time with people who valued her for who she was, who supported her ambitions, and who offered companionship without judgment or expectation. These friendships brought laughter, comfort, and a sense of belonging she had never fully experienced with her father. They became a vital part of her world, a reminder that family could be chosen as well as inherited, and that she could build connections based on trust and respect rather than fear or obligation. Maya also worked on repairing her relationship with her mother, Lillian. Over time, they shared honest conversations about the past, about Richard, about the years of neglect, and about Lillian's own silence. Lillian expressed regret for not standing up sooner, and while Maya acknowledged the pain of those years, she found a way to forgive without diminishing her own experience. Their bond, once strained by absence and disappointment, grew stronger, filled with mutual understanding and the beginnings of real trust. Among her belongings, Maya kept a small memento, her father's old watch. She had taken it long ago, not as an act of theft, but as a quiet reminder of the time he had wasted, both his own and hers. The watch sat on her desk, a symbol of the past she had endured and the life she had claimed for herself. Each glance at it reminded her not of anger, but of how far she had come. Sitting in her apartment one evening, Maya reflected on the journey she had taken. The betrayal had left deep scars, but it had also ignited a fire she could not have found any other way. She had faced the truth, planned carefully, and emerged stronger, wiser, and free from the weight of his judgment. She had reclaimed her life, her self-worth, and her peace. Though she would never forget the pain Richard caused, Maya understood that her true revenge had never been about punishment. It had been about growth, empowerment, and freedom. She had taken control of her story, and in doing so, she had created a life defined not by betrayal, but by her own strength, resilience, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing she no longer needed him to validate her.